I can run right through it.
Hold on. So guys, so for the audience, we've been talking for a little bit now. This is a staff meeting on Thursday, June 23rd. We haven't had a staff meeting because Kurt has been bogged down in personal legal nonsense. Anyway, we were just discussing that Lindsay's got on board with, are you going to start this up, Brandon, or do you want me?
Oh, go for it.
Lindsay had just had finally gotten on board with that woke as a state is being constructed as a state religion, and that this is against the Constitution, it's a violation of church and state. I've argued in the past that the Marxism was given the same accusation in the past, and that the court said, well, it didn't involve a god or whatever, so it wasn't a religion. Well, that's the wrong definition of a religion. So I've just, of course, formally defined what a religion consists of, and what a natural religion is, which is a truthful one that may be. It's true in the sense of mythically true, even if it's not, and the principles it conveys are true, even if it's still a religious, right, religious narrative, mythology. But I've tried to articulate what constitutes a religion that, in other words, the properties of formal properties of a religion that is an unnatural religion, which is basically device for sedition by seeking separatism as a means of rebellion against the status quo in order to obtain political power by those who lack merit. In other words, demonstrated competency. So I was going to go off on the religion a bit, and then Brandon says, stop, and you want to record this. And now I've forgotten what the fuck I was going to say. So maybe you can clue me into whatever the hell we were talking about. I've lost my train of thought.
It was based on what Martin said, so he framed you back in.
Well, I said that we should have a state religion so that a new one could be stuck in.
So in other words, the primary function of a state religion is prophylactic against immoral, unnatural religions. A truthful religion is one that maintains intergenerational transfers of debt. In other words, you owe your parents owe their parents, etc. Right? In other words, as a means of as a providing incentive for you, in other words, moral obligation for you to continue with the group evolutionary strategy that's expressed in the unstated metaphysics and the stated mythology that you run by. Well, of course, the most natural religion, of course, is ancestor and nature worship, because they are both real debts. And then there's a group, you can say, what group strategy do you have? Well, your group strategy can either correspond to the laws of nature or not. So, of course, the natural law or the laws of nature, your thanks or debt to nature for providing this planet to you, and the thanks to your parents, your ancestors, and your people for providing your existence. Those are all true debts, and that's a true strategy if you're under those circumstances. So there are any number of variants on a true religion, or a true, in other sense, a natural religion is the problem I should be using. A natural religion is a broader category. The one true religion would simply be the outline I've just mentioned. So you have a prophylactic. Now the question is, the question I was trying to get at, which is from Martin's lead, was that if you prohibit falsehoods in general, regardless of whether they're religious, will you end up with a true and natural religion? In other words, do you have to have a state religion as a prophylactic against it if you prohibit false religions? Because if you
You're asking if you have to impose one or if one will emerge?
I'm asking the question because I'm not quite sure. I mean, Christianity sounds really nuts until you understand that underneath it, it's just a vehicle for overcoming retaliation, right? It solves the problem of the prisoner's dilemma, which means there's only one solution, which is exhaustive forgiveness and the tit for tat.
Well, I've been looking into this, and if Guéhenot is right about this, then Christianity was first Judaized before it was Germanized, and
Yes,
If we remove Judaification, there's absolutely no problem with it.
there's absolutely,
No problem with it. But
yes,
Protestants would absolutely hate it. It requires completely rejecting the Old Testament.
correct. So can you elaborate? Okay, so for the audience, you don't know, Martin is extremely knowledgeable, terrifyingly so, which is his own work, right? He's a great example of learning by reading, right? Or learning by
Yeah.
audiobook in many cases.
Mostly.
Right. So, but he's a little shy on camera, and he's a little, and English isn't his first language. So it's really disconcerting when you realize this guy knows all this amazing shit and he writes amazingly, but he comes on here and he's the quietest one of us. So that's my lead in to tell the audience to make sure they listen to you. So in this case, could you sort of clarify the story you just told? How did that process of Judaizing and Germanizing work? In other words,
Well, I first have to explain what I now believe Christ's intentions actually were.
okay,
He was reacting to Judaism, which is a separatist group strategy
yes,
justified by religion, which priests use to gain power over the population.
yes,
He's trying to get them to start interacting with other peoples.
yes,
He's
he's trying to get them to interact with people. You're forgetting the word, or I'm not sure how to say it.
I got stuck in a loop.
Okay. I do that all the time.
And not to hate everybody else, basically, or
Yes.
to bring in the common beliefs of all the nations around, which relates to worship of Isis and Osiris in some form at that point, the belief in the afterlife, that you'll be judged for how you lived.
Mhm.
Whereas Jews at that point are completely materialistic. They only believe in their persistence as a genetic group.
Mhm.
And we know how that turned out. They getting crucified for it. And the process of Judaification, what happened, involves adding, again, instead of resurrection in the Osiric sense that Jesus transcended into afterlife, into a physical resurrection, materialistic.
Yes.
And it's messianism, it adds apocalypse. Revelations have absolutely nothing to do with Christianity.
Yes. Agree 100%. So it gets Judaized by the Jews.
Yeah. And
Why,
when it's
why is that?
well, I guess their goal was to undermine Rome.
I don't know the answer. I just know that
I'm
you're
not
right.
sure.
I just know that you're right so far, and everything. So, so what you closed by saying, you closed by saying that if you take that Judaism out, Judaization, whatever, out of it, you take the Judification out of it, then what's left is pretty good, right?
And what's left is also Jesus telling Jews that they are worshiping the devil.
Yes. So we have a guy who's really, I can't tell you if he exists or not. All right. If I understand it from your perspective, and because I have the same perspective, it's probably the case that he existed, right? That's how I would take it. I don't, but all the stuff that's built onto it, I don't have anything. But the underlying message is actually fucking awesome. How different is it from Buddha's message? Well, it's really
Well, there's more responsibility.
It's more responsibility, right? It asks you to be responsible for working with others, where Buddha is saying you be responsible for yourself and then be immune to others.
Well, Jesus asked you to suffer other people's order,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
These are things that you're in a feedback loop with the people around you. He was attempting to loosen the nepotism of the day,
Mhm.
right? If he existed, because it was causing strife. And you can't just enter into someone's home and ask them to abide by your rules,
Mhm.
right? So you're going to trespass on people. That's the beauty of the thing. They know we're going to. It's our job to forgive them the trespasses that they don't understand.
Mhm.
And it's only to the extent that you do that, that reality will forgive you.
Correct.
Jews weren't applying their rules only to themselves. They were circumcising their slaves.
Correct. You want one of the worst frames that I carry around? That America's men are just what Jewish sex slaves, because they were all circumcised at birth and a Jewish blood rite that our doctors perpetrate on the people here. You want an army of men that should be mad?
I'm just going to go with it's a habit, but okay. Anyway, the next thing, so I started out with this with, do you need if you put Christianity back down to that, which is the solution to the prisoner's dilemma, right? Which is how do you increase cooperation among people endlessly? You don't ignore you forgive their petty, stupid human foibles. And this turns out over time to be socially, politically, and economically advantageous. Socially, economically, and politically advantageous because it simply fosters cooperation, whereas the tribal method simply it's really a means of maintaining cooperative capital. The tribal method, right? You're trying to monopolize or maintain the in-group cooperation for in-group method, but it's like trying to maintain collective property. It's the same problem. You're actually decreasing the capacity of your group to improve, which is what we saw everywhere in the world. So Christianity is fine. So my point was, well, if I can science Christianity, right, which I did, right, I can science it. It's just a couple of basic principles, and that Jesus was actually telling the right thing. Then he's, whether you think of his theologically or philosophically or scientifically, or political, social scientifically, it's still the same fucking answer, which is just works. It certainly works because we can tell everybody gets Christianized has greater cooperation than everybody who doesn't. Greater responsibility than people who don't. So the second thing is then, okay, so what's that? That's one part of the thing, though. That's not how to run in other words, it's a personal philosophy that has social implication, social, economic, and political implications. But it's not a strategic or political or economic or social strategy. It's a personal philosophy that has social implications. So if we science the rest of the hierarchy, which is just what we have with natural law, which the Thomists pretty much had achieved, right? And if you look at this path from Thomism to the at least the Anglo Enlightenment, it's the same fucking argument. And you look at right up until the end of the 19th century, it's roughly the same argument, except the French got out of hand. So I just look at it as like, okay, if you just say if you outlaw all the falsehoods, what are you left with as a religion? I mean, what are you left with? And this is the problem I came up with originally, is that fundamentalist Christians are the actual impediment to prohibiting falsehoods. And in other words, prohibiting all falsehoods. And so the answer I came up with is you can't get around. In other words, it is entirely possible, because the Chinese and others have demonstrated it, to not have a religion, but to have a philosophy function as a religion, right? It's totally possible because other peoples have done it. It doesn't mean you don't have ancestor worship and spirits and animism and stuff. You tend to instill in those cultures because that's a natural religion. But it seems to me you're stuck with having a state religion of some sort simply because there's no way to get to the outlawing of falsehoods whilst with a bunch when you have such a large population of fundamentalist Christians. And so that's what I wanted to sort of discuss, is if you had any thoughts on that. I mean, in other words, go ahead.
Is containment sufficient? Maybe.
Yeah, I think that's probably you have to contain women, right? You're never going to make them rational.
Yeah.
I got a 1 out of you, and neither Luke nor Brandon gave me any response on that one.
Yeah, obviously. This is true.
It has to go somewhere. You have to, things like aggression, right? Hyperconsumption, they have to be redirected because they're modes of being. They're just biological modes of being. If they're not redirected properly, like they'll be transferred improperly.
It's like we redirected, Europeans redirected dominance expression to the production of commons
Correct.
through heroism instead of family and tribal goods, right? And so, or self family and tribal goods. And so you have to direct the female to something constructive. Now, it'd be nice to direct it to things like healthcare and taking care of the old and childcare, but it seems like women can't negotiate a law among themselves because they're not able to produce any kind of consistency internally. And so you have to impose a consistency externally, and that seems to be what religion does for them. The fact that men,
the obvious issue is that the goal of a lot of them will be to undermine other women.
yeah, well, I mean that's what they do. They undermine each other. I've probably told you the story about a company I was trying to take over, and it turned out that the women, the women had formed a little conspiracy circle and were like all these little demons whispering the CEO's ear. And he began to trust those women more than he trusted the men, and it killed the company. And why? Because the women are amazing at that. The next thing I noticed is that they destroyed the career of every woman in the company that disagreed with them. And ended up being one little Asian woman that was the top of it.
This is a Jewish group strategy.
Well, it's a female group strategy. And the Jews are just applying the female group strategy. So it's just, it's like,
it's not a strategy at all. It's a set of tactics without any strategy.
correct. That's actually
It's just responses. Well, I mean, when you apply it as a group, right? There are men who group up and undermine other men, right? You can take over a company in that sense. You can take over a nation, right? That way. But when it's wielded by women as a group, it's not like they're getting together and having women's meetings about how to undermine the order. It's just responding and shit testing their way through the thing like they're gonna, and we let it accumulate.
Well, if it produces some consistent results like this, it's a strategy. It doesn't have to be conscious. In fact, it works better if it's not.
We can identify it as a strategy. It's just not a conscious strategy, right? I mean, that's probably,
yeah, I'm okay with that.
Well, I mean, because we argue group evolutionary strategies aren't conscious either, right?
Right. Well, that's your metaphysics.
Yes,
people
exactly.
want to know like what constrains people's behavior. It's metaphysics, physics, biology.
Yes.
And you're trapped in that.
Brandon, this is a thing I've been thinking about this week, and you brought this up, I don't know, a couple of years ago. He says, well, I just look at constraints, right? Constraints-based reasoning. but that's falsificationism, right?
Yes.
Right. Right. And so if you look at how adults, I mean, you go from infantile, all about me, right? Childhood selfish, right? In other words, the infant's not even aware of anything other than, so you get childhood selfish to children, young children and rules, to young adults and more elaborate networks of rules, right? In other words, imitative rules versus abstract rules. Then really what you're talking, when people talk about outcomes, we're really talking about limits. We're working backwards from limits. And shit, what were you just talking about before I interrupted you?
it's okay.
Martin, I did the same fucking
Physics.
thing, Martin.
Metaphysics, physics,
Right.
biology.
The problem is that that it's requires quite a bit of knowledge to work backwards from constraints,
Yes.
right?
Or you can be an American entrepreneur, right? And have them beat into you. So that you can't not recognize your limits. When things like, I can't do that is something I say all the time. I look for people who I can pass people off to, who I say, I can't do that for. It's like,
Right.
all right, I can't do that, but this person can. Well, I like you guys because I can do that with you guys a lot, like across a few domains that are of importance. I go, well, you don't need what I know, you need what Luke knows.
Yes.
A lot more.
Yes.
So here's Luke's information.
So this, how do we, this is part of the story, right? Like we've gone through this history, right? But really, when we talk about falsification, we're talking about limits, right? I mean, that's identifying limits and working backward, right? And what is the infant doing? What is the child doing? What is the youth doing it? What is the teen doing it? What is the young adult doing it? What is the mature adult? Right? You're working from the point of which you have wants, to which you have options, to which you have justifications, to which you have permutations, to which you eventually get to the point where you have, you can actually work from limits, right? I mean, and like you said, Brandon, I mean, is that the whole fucking answer right there? Is that entrepreneurial accountability? In other words, the responsibility of entrepreneurs is actually teaches you the whole fucking answer to the problem, which is these are the limits that control my options, not these are the desires I seek to fulfill.
That's how I would frame things for America, at least. And we should do it first. Like if other people need different things, they'll figure that out. But we're offering you a methodology to test against the limits, right? What people are touching on in the narrative sphere is that the cohesion of your group creates a narrative, and it's against the limits of the present that projects your future vectors of opportunity.
Yes, yes.
All right, so we can't see our way through because we're not cohered in any form or fashion.
It's like the problem of quantity versus quality, right? People are trying to maximize all these opportunities, which are actually decreasing. Whereas one of the reason you want homogeneity is because you stop focusing on seizing trivialities, and you have to seek excellences, right? Which are right. So you focus the polity on obtaining excellences instead of focusing individuals on seizing opportunities.
So what I'm trying to do is create consensus around the opportunity presented in that the legal system in the United States cannot pursue all of us for crimes of rebellion. And we should just take this from them.
Okay, so you jumped ahead. Say that again. Say that, the legal
I
system.
want to organize all these people by consensus, meaning they can just understand that you can act in a way that's technically illegal now, that is right with natural law, that will realign this place, and you won't be punished because they can't do it.
You have to build a bridge there.
Sure. We apply our solutions across all arenas at the same time. So we give people liquidity in the present, we give them the necessary education to teach their children, we supply the inalienable rights and duties and the training programs that correspond with them would do this all at the same time, because it has to be done all at the same time. There isn't any way to do it.
Well, I mean, we set up the fucking Constitution. The French did their, everybody does it. It's surprising that it takes less than a decade for that stuff to populate through the, so it's not like there's,
We can do it faster this time because we just did 2 years of like training people against their will and making them bend to rules that harm them and their people and their children.
Yeah.
We just watched it happen, and a lot of them just bent over and took it. Like, okay, yeah, we'll do it.
so you're saying that it's implementation is demonstrably feasible.
And it's a moral duty
It's a moral.
to do it against their will. Just like you train and discipline children against their will. When else does discipline, and when else is discipline necessary?
Well, so
than against
again,
people's
that just comes down to the problem is obtaining the power to do so. So
Every
how-
man has the power to implement our plan where they are in
yeah,
a
I'm not buying that.
in a multitude of ways.
I don't buy the bottom up. I've never seen it fly. You can have separatism as a rebellion bottom up, but because you're always giving away something. We're saying you can pay the cost of responsibility, and that doesn't appear to be a bottom up strategy that ever survives, because the competition is always an advantage because they're always paying a lower cost.
The men around you, their duty will be to punish people who aren't being responsible.
Right. I mean, once you create the framework, but how do you get the political thing and how do you get the law in place? I mean, I don't know how to do it other than the way I've argued. I mean, I just don't see it as any other solution. I mean, it takes so many guys to create enough risk, to create enough discussion in order to hold the public attention long enough that they're actually able to perceive the option. I don't believe the public will disagree with anything we've offered. Right? What I believe is the cathedral will do everything in its power to preserve its rent seeking, when what we've done is essentially eliminate rent seeking across the spectrum. I mean, we've made it almost impossible to rent seek. I mean, we've criminalized it. So,
Well, you can seek rents, but you will not find them.
yeah. So, my attitude has been all along that, it's like Brandon and I came back thinking from the July 4th thing and thinking we just dodged a bullet, because if we got fully entrenched along with the hard right, we'd have been. And right now we're at least accused of it, but what we're actually offering is just an improvement on the center. So the problem is that how do we get the center aware of how much better their lives will be? Now, I argued in the past, because I thought this current crisis that's unfolding now, it's going to happen between 17 and 25, right? I mean, right. I kept thinking that the economy was going to go faster than this. It's like the Chinese economy is finally flipping, but Chinese economy is flipping 10 years after I thought it would. It took 10 years longer. Well, the American economy is finally flipping. It's flipping a little later than I thought it would. So it's finally flipping. If you have the economy, because it's going to get dick sucking or awful for people pretty quick, right? And if you have the geostrategic collapse, which is going to again create stresses, they create this opportunity for looking for a future other than the one everyone's predicted. But I don't know how to get attention for something that I perceive is not very simple. I just don't know how to do it other than the way, despite the fact that everybody would want it. It's not like a soundbite.
I don't know.
I want to hear what you have to say.
So we make the presumption that we can't get by without these institutions, right? And yet the institutions aren't serving us, so we are actively getting by without the institutions. So this idea that we can't get by without the institutions is nonsense. We're doing it right now. None of the institutions are serving us and we're getting by.
The institutions are serving us by equally blockading any progress by anyone. In other words,
That's not what I'm seeing. I'm seeing progressivism is progressing. I'm seeing kids get their penises chopped off.
Yeah.
I'm seeing drag shows in libraries. So
Okay,
yes, they
so-
are progressing.
okay, so I mean, but we still have to create, you have to create a domain of control, right? How do you create that domain of control? I mean, it does,
Or you have to deny the existing domain of control.
okay, fine, that's still the same thing. You have to create it. It doesn't matter what the individual does, because the individual has nothing to do. You can't run away. You can't check out. There's nowhere to check out to. There's nowhere to run away to. The individual has no coercive power.
Let's start there with that as a constraint. Like there's no escaping this conflict. There's no running. It's global. There's no place to go. All right. So you're stuck in it now. So now everyone has to choose to fight. Right?
Yeah, well, everyone has to choose to fight, but they have to have something to fight for. My argument has been that people actually don't know what to do. In other words, they have the right is such a bunch of fucked up young man boys, right? That they can't, it's impossible. They just reach forever, whatever jerks their dick, right? And that just means they go to these ridiculous, absurd extremes, right? That don't have any chance of success, right? So I'm looking at it and say, well, how do we get people aware of the option? And the problem is people won't invest people don't invest in options. Look how hard it was for the founders. Look how long it took for the French Revolution. Every one of these things takes a lot of time. And the difference is you're always promising somebody a discount. So
I'm not.
What?
Great.
We're not.
Yeah.
I'm not.
I think we are.
Well, it's a relative discount to
Yes.
current expenses.
Yes.
Well, we're proposing that if you would move through an adaptive valley with the rest of us, we will come out on the other side better. It's going to take a sacrifice in the present,
Yeah.
but it's not going to be worse than the sacrifice you are facing arbitrarily at the hands of people who hate you.
We know what the difference is that this is what I view as the core problem. All these little people living in their rabbit warrens, believing that they have, with TV friends, right, that haven't had to learn to socialize, or they haven't had to learn to entrepreneurialize like farmers had to. They haven't had to learn to do anything except masturbate and so hyper consume. So how do you get those people to actually overcome their little fantasy world? Break down that wall and start talking to ordinary people in large enough numbers, they can actually achieve something.
I'm unsure we need those people right away. Meaning, as long as they don't get in the way, then they're irrelevant at first. It's always going to be a set of movers, of first movers. And we also need to offer an offset for the institutions that are disserving people, as Luke was saying. We offer that in education. We offer that's what we're doing. We offer an offset for people to check out of where they are into some place that's going to help them.
What did Lenin do?
At which point in history?
When he moved to Russia. Difference is he's giving a false promise. Who's the opposite? What did the founder, see, the problem is the counter proposition.
Supposedly, what is to be done is extremely pragmatic.
Say again?
Lenin's work, what is to be done, is supposedly extremely pragmatic.
Mhm.
No false promises for the movement itself.
The thing I'm seeing is we're trying to convince a bunch of people that grew up failed by government to invest in a new form of government. And what I'm suggesting is they're better off investing in each other.
Well, I would agree, invest in each other, but it doesn't mean that investing in each other has any. I mean, it's the libertarian Marxist fallacy, right? Is that you can that without force you can obtain and hold sovereignty for whatever order you wish. Now, I mean, why do Amish exist here? Right, because we protect them. But there are plenty of sects that get destroyed over if they're separatist. So you can have like Luke, for example, I look at your work as personal and family philosophy. That's the domain you sort of work in, and it's really fucking good. I mean, you're great at it. And so I like that because it's sellable, right? The thing is that I look at the world as the people who agree somewhat, the people who are just want a fucking answer that isn't a problem, and the people who are trying to lie, cheat, and steal their way out of everything. And so you have these this big distribution of people, and it's roughly about a third, and a third, which is what you'd fucking expect anyway. I mean, everywhere. And and the problem is that cults and what do you call it, cartels, they're all the same thing, right? And so you can't. We have a cult and a cartel, a bunch of cartels in charge. And instead of trying to raise the lower class with false promises they can be middle class, we've got a middle class and basically a working class that have been fucked over by a clerical class, right? The credentialed class, who are no longer working in their interest. So the thing is, that's what you need in order to produce a revolution. You need a class that's large enough to defeat the entrenched class by multiple avenues, economically, politically, militarily, whatever. It would seem to me that possibility exists. The problem is there's been no Rousseau working over time, or Voltaire. There's been no Locke and Smith and Hume and whatever. There's been no Marx and his initial Marx and Lenin and etc. There's just not been enough time, the same way there's not been enough time to fix the churches. So we have a harder problem. In other words, the oppressor in the revolution who's the oppressor today? The oppressor's the credentialed class, right?
I think people oppress themselves.
Huh?
I think people oppress themselves.
All people oppress themselves. All people get the government that ask for. They just don't know they're asking for it. So I don't see. I see the demographic opportunities in place, but there's no clear enough complaint to answer with a solution. Maybe that's what I'm looking for. The public needs a clear enough complaint. In other words, market demand needs to exist or be generated. And we're just early in our stage of trying to generate. Yeah, okay. Sorry. I had to work through that myself. I apologize. Okay, so so to get back to Luke, I understand that's actionable, and I understand that's a good thing. I just don't believe you can scale that to solving the political problem. I mean, you can I would have said the manosphere can't scale either, so maybe you're right. So it's possible. Maybe it's possible. I'm just not socially aware enough to understand it. So,
I think we're going to see social adaptation do things that we haven't seen it do before because of the technologies. And that you were saying that not enough time has passed, but the information density that passes over time has increased. So the amount of change in how it is people think is is occurring just over a shorter amount of time.
It's really surprised. I mean, I would have never expected the rate at which the public is
Well, we've all
changing right
we've
now.
all had the internet and access to information for the same amount of time, like as long as we were adults when the internet was on set, like, and information was abundant. So there's a learning curve for having that store of information. Like, we're playing on an even playing field across generations.
Yeah, so yeah, although it's
We have institutions that are too slow. Use the example like
of course.
our leaders are 80, right? So they created a generational drag. So people who are my age, 30, 40, we're the teenagers still, for whatever reason. That's how they're treated in discourse.
Well, there's, honestly, because we had the free ride from 89 forward, right? We had the free ride until 2008. We sort of lost that generational focus.
Yes.
And
That's a good way to put
it went to individual hyperconsumption, individual satisfaction, rather than political, which is, always the problem in Western civilization is that there's no doctrine among a free people. The problem has always been, as I quote him all the time, Ortega y Gasset said that, without a mission, Europeans have no soul, so to speak, because we have to have a war to fight in order to unify, because we're all individuals. You see that at the European level, as that all of a sudden Europe is falling apart as an experiment until the Russians get out of hand, and all of a sudden the Europeans start getting their shit together, right? So this is a constant problem in the West, is that we need a heroic people requires a heroic challenge in order to overcome individualism. In other words, and work toward a common goal instead of individual satisfaction. It sounds horrible when you say it that way, but realistically, it works fucking phenomenally because it makes you hyper adaptive. I mean, Hayek came over here and he was talking, and he's got a great speech. He says, well, I've been over in Austria, and we change at a certain rate, but you folks in America, you people in America, you Americans, he said, you guys can change your entire country in a completely different direction in a couple of weeks. Well, that's the value of what we do, but the stress of what we do is if you have a period of peace, and luxury, you essentially produce a peace and luxury generation that's, an institution. So we don't have that we have a generation that consists of Clinton and Bush and actually Carter, and we have a whole bunch of presidents who exist in an era of relative luxury, and we haven't generated a political class that's militaristic enough kind of purpose. And so this gave even more opening to the left, which depends on the claim that we can consume endlessly without limits.
I think that kind of brings us back to one of the roles that at least a conceptualization of religion serves, right? It gives us a mechanism to identify non-martial enemies.
That's very smart.
That's
Right? Very smart.
I mean, Martin
Jesus,
nailed it.
dude, Luke, that was really fucking smart.
Martin nailed it when he said we're competing with enemies rather than fighting with enemies, right? That's how we're undermined right now. Our enemies are all hiding the fact that they're enemies.
Taking
They're all-
advantage that
They
will be
the female
adversarial.
strategy is to hide behind plausible deniability.
Right. So we can't group up because we can't see them as enemies to group up against.
But they are.
Well, it's really hard for me to sympathize with people for whom the deniability is still plausible.
Yes. So, oh God, that was really good. So there's your argument for stating us. I mean, you can state the state, you could state the state religion is going to tolerate these things, right? In other words, the state can say religions must tolerate in other words, religions must not violate these principles in order to be, not be, in order to actually be religions and not warfare.
And yeah, in order to obtain the protections of religion.
Right. Oh, I like that. In other words, so yeah, so we can do it. We can do it by the via negativa. We don't have to, right? And we don't have to outlaw the mythology itself. We just have to say what it can't promise.
Right. And if it makes that promise, it loses protection.
Something I didn't say about the deified Christianity is that it doesn't require monopoly anymore.
It doesn't
require monopoly. There wouldn't be that contempt for others that don't believe as you do.
Yes. Christianity shouldn't, and I'm talking not about churchianity, but what Martin said, described Christianity as the original. And it shouldn't require, in other words, evolutionary competition should make it win anyway over time. Because it really is, it's really asking you to do a really simple thing. It's not be petty.
I mean, Jesus isn't the only one who said it, right?
Yes.
You can get that strategy from other sources.
From pretty much everywhere. Yeah, exactly. Don't be petty. I actually really like I like feminine Christian feminine love, right? I like that opposition to Arianism. I think there's a beautiful equilibrium there between feminine care and charity, feminine love, care and charity, masculine heroism, and empirical judicial neutrality. I just think it's a nice equilibrium. I say that only because I look at the triangle and say, well, what would the extremes look like if they weren't bad? Well, that's what they'd look like. They'd look like responsibility for the polity, responsibility for the weak children, and responsibility for dispute resolution.
That's what it provides, though. It provides a pathway to responsibility for all parties, right? That coverage there. So
yeah, I mean, it covers the triangle. So we've
Right.
got a pathway to responsibility for nerds like us, right? I mean, for the macho guys and for the chicks, and is everybody in between.
it's compatibility. I mean,
Yep.
it's how you demonstrate compatibility. So yeah.
Well, that was a deep conversation. Can I get more coffee? Because I only had one cup. And
Sure.
I don't feel like I have the excess energy to tease Martin with only one cup of coffee. Not that it does me any good. You were really adorable, Martin, this week when you said, hey, look, I just assume everything you say is, no, what you think that, how did you put it? Explain.
You think you're crossing some lines. You might with normies, but not here.
God, I love you guys.
So it's just sometimes even hard to see you mean it as a joke.
That's horrible.
None of this stuff is funny.
I have to make it funny because otherwise I get too upset.
Well, yeah, it's a drama or a tragedy, a comedy or a tragedy.
Well, so I also said, if I'm trying to be funny, I have to cross many lines beyond that.
Wait a minute. How many of you guys, Brandon, you drink mostly tea or do you drink coffee too?
I have a coffee in the morning, usually.
What about you, Luke?
I was a coffee drinker for a long time, but I really stopped drinking it this year altogether. So maybe I've had maybe 3 or 4 cups in the last several months. So
Oh, that's good. I know it's not good for me.
Say again, Martin? I just sorry, I didn't hear that.
I'm saying Luke's doing a good thing for himself. The
you
coffee,
Do you drink coffee, Martin?
I drink a lot of coffee.
Yeah,
and
same
I
here.
should.
See, so we have the coffee drinkers on this side. And the coffee abstainers on that side, or near abstainers on that side.
Well, that's not how it displays for me.
Anyway, all right, so that was, my brain is a little confused right now, so that was kind of fun. So anything else happened over the past week? So we've had I talked about my health, I talked about the website, we talked a little bit about the Second Amendment thing, which I really fucking love. I can't wait to see all the flaming hair of all the liberals running around screaming over the next couple of days. And then we talked a little bit about religion, and I think we had a really nice conclusion there, which is we can just say what the difference between a religion and a sedition. In other words, religion and religion as a means of fostering cooperation and well-being, and religion as a means of sedition and warfare. And I think we have that. That was pretty useful. That was one of the more actually.
I'm under the impression that we're the only universalist humanitarian position that exists.
Yeah, well, again, it's the problem though, is that it's not easy to get here. Do you know what I mean? I mean, Jesus, and we're not, I mean,
We're offering you the law as a culture, and you can have any civilization that you want.
well, we're offering a moral culture. The problem is that what we mean is a moral, like a reciprocally moral culture, right? Whereas people's vision of what's moral depends on how much responsibility they want to have. So we like responsibility. So the thing is, we're offering a moral culture, which means responsibility. But there are so many people that don't want the responsibility. So we have to ask ourselves, what is the real problem here? Is it what we're offering, or is it that they can only interpret what we're offering in the context of an economic model which throws people to the wolves?
but that it brings us back to the talk we were doing earlier about limits, right? What people aren't recognizing is that limits are also structure, right? I mean, we put up walls and they limit the space of our home. They also support the second floor, right? So I mean, those concepts are interchangeable. Limits has a negative connotation for a lot of people, but that's because they're not recognizing that that's what we build upon.
Right. In other words, I hate to run with analogies, but that one's so good I could play with that all day. It's like the ants don't dig out the foundations, right? And then get themselves crushed by the collapse of the earth along them. So the problem is the laws of the universe exist, right? They exist, and they're consistent and whatever. You can't get around them. Then of those laws, I mean, every religion we know of is promising some. Well, it's not really true. Every religion we currently fight with is promising some freedom from those laws, right? And there are metaphysical, there are metaphysically non-false promises. Life after death, your soul, these things. These are not really bad concepts because they're actually just mythicizations of actual phenomenon, right? So they make perfect sense in that sense. But when you start promising people that you can, that there's a horn of plenty out there, that or that human behavior is going to change from being consistent with the rest of the laws of the universe, or that evolution is going to operate by some other, then you're getting to the point where you're making a false promise that isn't not only isn't metaphysically true, but it's physically false. Right. I mean, so that's the issue.
Promise leads to retaliation from people in the real. That's what we're trying to tell people. What you're doing when you make promises like that is accumulating a debt against the people that exist. Because if you offload your responsibility, it goes to the responsible agents. It goes somewhere. So you're not shouldering your own. Like, people need to choose to help you. That's what we do with children. We forbear for them, invest in them.
Yep.
You have to make yourself worthy of investment or you won't be. And we're laying out the criteria for just delineating what you called earlier.
I don't care. I'm
surplus
only going to
humans.
live this life once. The world can go on without me. You have no right to oppress me and make me, all right.
The world is gonna go on without you. I have no reason or want to oppress you. Have fun for yourself.
So, I mean, keep selecting yourself out of the gene pool. That's fine, right? All right. So let's run with this, complete this cycle. So
There's no escaping the laws of nature.
No.
Limits allow you to leverage them.
correct. Thank you. That's the right answer. You can, the laws of nature can either be an impediment to a falsehood or an advantage to obtain a truth, a utility, right? So here's the scary model. I've said before that what I'm afraid of is that, what's the term for evolution not producing advanced life? It's not the blocking.
Great filter.
What the great filter, thank you. So I've said the great filter is actually cooperation, right? We think cooperation is really good, but it's a bell curve. At some point, if you keep trying to cooperate at all costs, what you're actually doing is devolving. So we don't think of it this way because we are the Europeans. We had the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, and the Steel Age great leaps forward created by the Indo-Europeans, the Mediterraneans, and the Northern Europeans. So if you look at that, it was like, okay, great. But they say, well, China had this for X thousand years. Right. And what happened? Nothing. Egypt had this for 1,000 years, thousands and thousands of years. What happened? Nothing. So the Middle East had this for thousands of years. What happened? Nothing. So
Perhaps worse than nothing.
what?
Worse than nothing. In Middle East.
Worse
case.
than nothing. They went backward. And so the problem is that that there's a, I can't remember who said it. He says, I'm a little worried that the end result is always communism. Is, in other words, that and I'm a little worried, in other words, the appeal of communism is the same thing as the appeal of agrarian theology and in empire. In other words, they're genetic dead ends.
That's why we make appeals to it criminal. That's a false promise.
It's a false promise. So the problem is there's a conflict there. So the way you have, so the problem, people would say we have to ignore this limit. We can't ignore the limit, right?
We have to explain it.
We have
The
to
conflict
explain
there
it.
is between the adults and the children. and
Right.
There shouldn't be conflict.
But moreover, we have to ameliorate it. In other
Yes.
words,
Oh, yeah.
so what people hear when we say, genetic differences are what they are, class differences are genetic differences, it's, et cetera. Our abilities our abilities are across the spectrum, and no matter what we do, this problem is only going to get worse. And so you have to just look at it and say, okay, well, how do we ameliorate this problem? You don't do it by telling people you're fucked. You say, there's a trade-off we have to make, and this is the trade-off. Just like the people who are, you're a woman, you get a fancy, this is good. Can I say something really offensive?
You can try.
I don't
We'll be
doubt
a-
it.
What?
I don't doubt it that you can say something really offensive.
May I is the. So is there any value to women in the workplace?
No.
No, there isn't really. The only value of women in the workplace is increased taxes, which increase the scope of the cathedral. That's all that's happened, right? At the expense of reproduction.
I mean, with caveats, no, right? I mean, they make a good nursing workforce. They should teach your kindergartners and so on, but there's no space for them in
Did you
the
just
space.
max alt me?
Yeah, yes, I did.
I just want to make sure that
For women as a group, I max alted you. Right? That's for everybody. That's impressive white knighting.
Well, so let's increase the precision then, all right?
Yes.
Which is the ambition to equilibrate, in other words, male and female rates of employment. That beneficial? No.
That's harm. That's
It's actually
demonstrably harmful.
Right. And what it has done is facilitate has facilitated the funding of the clerical class that has created this
That caters to those women.
caters to those women. Now, but at the expense of rates of reproduction necessary to maintain the hyper-consumptive system
Well,
that they are
that's-
dependent upon for existence.
Yes, and that's the lie. It's like you want women to make up 50% of your lumberjacks that lose their life at an alarming rate. They're more valuable than us, so they don't take jobs that involve serious bodily risk because we won't let them. And if we do let them, we're not doing our job as men.
Curtis say it was, but at the cost of that, I say it was by design.
Yes. Well, of course, I agree with you. So now my there's too many fun places to go here. I got distracted.
If nothing else, the problem is they bring with them the protections we afford women into those workspaces.
Correct. They bring form the privileges. And I always say, I say this to a couple of women, you get these deferences because you can be mothers, not because you're women.
Yes, yes.
If you're not mothers, there's no reason to give it to you.
That's what being a woman is supposed to mean.
That's a hugely important distinction.
It's not because you're female. It's because being a mother is costly, that we afford you all these preferences. In other words, you get preferential treatment because we want to teach people, everybody, men in particular, to treat mothers with care because it's a burden to care for children, right? But if you don't have children, you're actually just displacing a man who would do your job better anyway.
Right. We're investing in your potential to be a mother.
Yes.
And then you complain when we ask, where's the return on investment?
I don't want to, I'm sorry, but you guys got me in this manosphere thing last year. And I'm just so fucking blown away by it. I mean, I can't understand a normie in the first place. I mean, I have to work to how did you get to that stupid fucking idea? Right now we got women, which are a lot of them lower class women. In other words, they're lower middle class, upper prole, middle prole, or lower prole. And they can talk about their dating preferences. And we're talking about the makeup and shit and all this other crap. And how many of them think they're 10s? Like, we need more. We need a Kevin Samuels in every grade school in America. We need to teach that. I don't know what the hell's going on here, because you listen to these women, it's like you're absolutely fucking crazy.
Well, you have media and advertising and academia are convincing them of their value, regardless of how disgusting they may be.
Well, I don't know.
This is the value.
Is it true, or is it that we are no longer suppressing female antisocial behavior?
It's both.
Okay, it's both.
That's why we're not suppressing female behavior.
Okay, that's why. Okay,
profitable to push all the product.
I mean, because these women, it's like they're finally figured out. It's fucking hysterical. I think I told you guys one of the experiments I ran was a website called A Market for Affection, and this is before all this got out of hand. Now I was just trying to say that men adapt to the market for affection that women create. But if you create a market, be careful what market you create. Like, so the Southern Belles created an amazing fucking market for women, right? Which is still surviving among a lot of girls in the South today. Right? But what did the New York Jewish women create? I mean, it's this shit. So you look at this and I'm like, well, women, what's happened is guys have adapted, right? It was slow, but once it got critical mass, all of a sudden women start noticing it. But it just, we're not, we haven't identified that as, and what women do is antisocial behavior. Because it's antisocial in the sense that it's inhibiting the production of stable families. It's inhibiting, right? It's causing men who are very physically desirable to plow through a whole bunch of women who are fucking stupid, right? And who are very addicted to attention. So we are telling you that we are telling women that desire for attention is antisocial. That promiscuity is antisocial, right? Right. It didn't matter that we told men that promiscuity is, because they fucking couldn't do it anyway. I mean, it doesn't matter what you tell men. Why is it okay? Well, because they can't do it anyway. Women say, why is it okay for men? Well, who says it's okay for men? They can't fucking do it anyway. I mean, maybe they can. I mean, Tiger Woods. I mean, Jesus. I mean, that fucking, he could have just back in the day, he could have set up a line and charge tickets. Anyway, so where was I going with this? Women in the workforce aren't valued. In other words, it goes back to, I'm sorry, I hadn't see these patterns and I don't tie them together. So Luke is talking, I'm talking about falsification. Luke's talking about falsification. Brandon's talking about falsification. We're talking about limits, right? And whatever. And so do we have to specify a thing or do we just have to state the limits? So my view on female antisocial behavior is, let's just state what female antisocial behavior is. What does that run up against? That runs up against individualism. Well, individualism in our law is a legal concept, not a political one. Political concept that we've always had is the family. So as long so the individual can only be accountable for his actions, but the family is the purpose of policy. The individual isn't the purpose of policy. That just leads to what you guys brought up earlier, which is lack of cohesion. Right? So the family is the purpose of policy, which is the purpose of norms, traditions, and values, because the family is the producer of the thing that polities depend upon. They're called humans. Not that we seem to be producing too many humans these days. I don't know, but there are some out there. So it seems to me that just stating the negative is enough, right? I mean, I don't see why anything else. You don't have to state the positive, just state the negative. But what do you do with all the women who love their whoring ways? I mean, do you realize how much money some of these women make on OnlyFans?
Yes.
I had no idea. I just thought it was like another porn site. I've never actually, I don't know how to, I guess you have to pay to get into the thing. I've never seen it. I've just seen cutout videos taken from it. But I mean, apparently women make millions, because some women can make millions of dollars of this shit. Is that
I
true?
wouldn't be surprised.
Right. So I don't know why we let that happen. I used to be.
I know why.
Because we don't see that as enemies.
Correct. Because we haven't fully.
Those of us that do see it don't have power.
Okay, so this goes back to what you got, Luke was saying here. So which is, it's a failure full accounting of the means of warfare. And all we're doing is fully accounting for the means of crime.
And we also focus on behaviors, not people. I don't consider evil behaviors something that is adversarial, right? They're just to be stamped out, when they
Oh.
express themselves.
You
We
mean,
can- we can
yeah,
tolerate bad, we forbear for bad behavior, right?
I
But
want to
not
go
evil
Viking.
behavior.
I want to go raping and pillaging and looting and killing and stuff. But my behavior gets suppressed.
Yes, it does.
Well, I would talk about an adversary here in the sense of Satan.
That was a good enough one.
I don't get it. I went over my head.
Satan means adversary. It's
Oh.
satanic.
So my desire to loot, to rape and loot and pillage and war is suppressed. Heck, my ability, I mean, in Ukraine, I got my bodyguard and a couple of his friends to walk into one of the underlings of one of the gangsters and say, if I have to come back here, you won't like it, which was really clear. I can't do that in America. I'm oppressed. I was after a moral objective. I was preventing corruption from interfering in a business transaction. It wasn't a big one. It was like $30,000 or $40,000, right? But I didn't want to have any more of this corruption or manipulation going on. So I got my bodyguard, who's a little kind of he's like only about 5'9", but he had big friends. And Slavic guys are beautiful. I mean, they really are. And in a sense,
Thanks.
what?
Thanks.
I mean, really, it's the broad shoulders, the height, and they work on the weights. They're fucking scary as fuck. So I walk in with, 5 guys, a girl, and me, and I said, I don't want to have this problem. I don't want to come back here again. But I'm in America. I'm oppressed from exercising that male virtue of suppressing criminality by threat of violence. So if all my methods of antisocial behavior are suppressed, why aren't the female methods of antisocial
Before unsuppressing some of the male stuff.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
of the female stuff.
We need to meet in the middle on some of that stuff. We need to
Let's
start
meet in the
suppressing some of
middle.
the feminine and start with relieving some of the suppression of the masculine.
Yeah, I think
It's not antisocial if you're acting on.
Kind
Or
of
pro-social-
pro-social man.
for pro-social needs.
Right.
It's
Well,
like, go ahead.
we've over suppressed the males because we don't have norms anymore. Though we invite
Yes.
a bunch of people in.
Well,
that
that's
don't
that they
share
did it
those
on
norms.
purpose, though, right? That was
Right,
the purpose.
right. And so they're going to walk down the street punching random people. So then you have to suppress punching as a response to anything, right? You just can't allow anyone to punch. Whereas in a society with norms, if somebody's stepping out of line, you punch them in the face.
Yes,
And
another
that's
reason.
not prosecute.
Another
no,
reason
that's
I
not
love
a-
Russians.
It's not a violation of any law when you have the norms that account for it. But when you have this diversity, you can't have the norms that account for it.
Yes. None of this. I just really, I loved the fact that if you talk smack, I mean, I realize I've spent most of my time in Kiev, right? So, but I love the fact that if you're in a bar and people will talk smack, but you will also get your face punched in, right? And everybody will try to break it up like gentlemen, right? Right, which is fine, but it just works. And then you notice all the guys with taped fingers on Saturday and Sunday morning because they got in a fight last night and they broke something, right? And that I didn't see that as a problem. I saw that as good social policing, right? And I usually have one of these. If you order a coffee in a ceramic mug, you have something you can hit someone very hard with. That came in very handy a couple of times. Coffee, you have your water and you have your alcohol and you have your girls. And that's all the world needs. It's it. You have your girls and your couple of guys, mostly girls. The more girls, the fewer guys, the better. Because then the girls talk about nonsense, right? And you can couple of guys talk shit. And then if anybody gets out of hand, you don't have to have a gun. You just, because they're drunk usually, you just have a very heavy ceramic object in your hand, and it's very useful. I don't know how I got out of that silly stuff. I was trying to add levity. It didn't quite work. Anyway, so so we're getting back to, you're right. We have to loosen up the fighting thing. I mean, look at all the broken teeth I got from fighting. I'm a little guy, I couldn't put up. I don't know how Brandon, did you get in fights a lot?
No, I did martial arts early, so
Okay.
we were trained to hurt people that harm us. That's all.
Luke, were you a fighter at
We
all?
did it for sport. We wrestled a lot.
You seem very calm to me, Luke.
Luke was a wrestler.
Yeah, yeah, I was a wrestler through much of my use. I wasn't I didn't fight a whole lot. What I couldn't tolerate much was the bullying, right? So
Yes.
if there's a kid that was bullying the younger kids in the neighborhood, that's who I would be in a confrontation with, or end up in a confrontation with. So
You've been a
there was
moral
some- there was
police
some
your
of
whole
that.
life.
yeah, yeah.
I can't tell with you, Martin. You seem like you're like the inoffensive type.
Mostly. I've only done like a year of Krav Maga, which I refer to as.
Yeah, but
training.
you don't. I don't see you as the kind of guy who, like, I have a big fucking mouth, and if I can start a problem, I seem to be drawn to the opportunity to start a problem. So I would get in fights all the time. So I don't see you as doing that.
Yeah, you probably won't get me into a fight with just words.
Anyway, okay, so I was trying to make a point there. I was saying Luke was building on something.
Limits,
Limit.
antisocial behavior.
Okay, we need to equilibrate the male and
Yeah.
female.
So we construct these civilizations and they form a buffer between us and the immediate consequences of nature. Right. I mean, that's what civilization does. As we get
Yeah.
better at civilization, that buffer gets bigger. We're not facing the immediate consequences of nature. Right.
Mhm.
What we forget to do is bring those limits of nature with us as we construct those civilizations. And that's all we're
Mhm.
suggesting we do.
Mhm,
Is we bring
mhm.
those limits with us as we construct these civilizations, so that we don't find ourselves in situations like now that are destroying the civilizations that we're building.
Actually, that's a brilliant line of inquiry. So what facilitates the social construction of non-correspondence with reality? That's a really interesting question. What,
Well, it's never hitting limits. Good ones, real ones, because that's reality. When you hit them,
And you want to hit them in our world where there's safety nets and stuff around you, and not
you want
Be
us to be a
confronted with-
proxy for hitting the
Correct.
limits of nature.
right.
That's right.
that's really smart. There's a story there, and I'm gonna lose it before I write it down, but there's a story there. In other words, there's a narrative there that explains, how did you just say it? Oh, Christ.
Dragging limits of nature into civilization or into culture with us, replacing them.
That story's gotta get concretized. 'Cause that's a really good narrative.
And how
Yeah.
you want us to be the enforcers of limits and not nature to be the enforcers of
Right,
limits.
you want
Each
man.
other.
There we go. That's why, okay, that's where I was sensing is that's what the natural law is, right? The laws of nature, the natural law. It's
Right.
continuing the laws of nature into the thing
We-
and limiting social construction to those things.
Reciprocity is pushing the limit. It's nature, then human nature, because human nature is also a limit, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
we're having retaliatory cycles.
we
Going,
are
hey, there's a
capable,
limit here.
yeah,
Human
we are
nature has a
capable,
limit. Go
we are
ahead.
capable of offering you forgiveness in ways that nature never will be.
Okay, so that's, sometimes I want to take that lovely fuzzy head of yours and kiss you right on the lips. Okay, so that's it. Shit, I lost it. Repeat it.
We can
Yeah.
offer you forgiveness that nature can't.
Correct. So,
That's why we bring the limits forward with us. as we
yeah, but
create
it's also why we
civilizations.
use forgiveness,
Yes, that is why
right?
we use forgiveness.
Right, because the forgiveness is the means by which we pay the, well, you use, what do you use? You use forgiveness, you use
Forbearance.
forbearance.
My
is-
investment in the unworthy.
Well, I mean, the
potential-
reason is
The
that you have
potential for worthy.
you have to, the cell wall has to pay the cost, we have to pay a cost of the interior adapting,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
that's we need to work, we need to flesh out that narrative because it's very hard to say, well, natural law is, and therefore.
Right.
Right, and then build up cooperation from then.
Right.
And it's one thing to say, well, it's just a triangular. There's another one to say, to tell the story of, well, the problem is, as we grow in complexity, we insulate the population from the effects of nature. I mean, that's what
Right.
cooperation at scale does. But we have to bring the rules, the limits that nature imposes us into that system, else the system will begin to diverge from the nature that man
Right.
is trying to protect it from. So all you do is you're basically saying, if we're buying time, adaptive time, right, by insulating, and then what's happening is, by not respecting those laws, we're spending that adaptive time back down
Right.
to the point where we reach failure. That's the story. We got that story is that's the other angle. What is that?
The pitch we're making is, nature would kill you for that. I'm not going to, but if you keep it up, I'm going to let you talk to nature again.
Yes, yes. Nature will kill you for it. You are asking nature, you are baiting your fellows into the hazard of causing nature to destroy us, which is what exactly they've done, right?
So for some reason, it's just more understandable when you call it God.
Yeah.
Of course, it's anthropomorphic. The system, the body is a system of measurement. God is the same system of measurement. It's much easier to understand as God. Can't think of that. Is such a great opportunity for something funny to break the context and add levity, and I can't think of a goddamn thing. How long have we been doing this? 11.
I feel like I've made jokes so much harder for you now.
You've what?
Made jokes so much harder for you now.
I love you, man.
Apologies.
That's another one of those times you apologize. I'm like, oh no, you're having a blast with this. Jesus, that was another good conversation. Okay, anything else, guys? Because I don't think we need to beat on that one anymore. We're still not.
I think at some point we should talk about the attention market in general, which I brought up. The policies relating to it. It doesn't have to be on this one.
Well, let's just outline a little bit. Is that okay, honest? Because I got another 10 minutes. So you want to outline a little bit? So attention.
Well, yeah, it starts with defining agency as capital.
Yes.
And that's, let me just read it. My argument is that everything that grabs your attention needs to update your model of the world towards higher accuracy, which is basically what Brandon has been saying for a while now.
Yes.
And that everything that provides psychological rewards also needs to contribute to our sustenance or capitalization in some form. You cannot be rewarded for consuming commons yourself, or even perhaps for wasting time.
Yes. I have that.
That's what creates addiction loops.
I think as soon as we
that's
define the agency as capital, then it falls right into universal standing, because you can demonstrate a violation or a cost against that capital. So I think we cover it with that universal standing and with just the rules that are already in place.
But I think it's worth. So like you just did that, right? I mean, this is part of the problem, is that once you get good at this, the causal chains are really obvious. We have to cover the causal chain. So I like the idea of writing a piece on attention. So what do we call it? The attention economy, or the attention property, or attention as a property? The way I have it is in the section on rights and obligations, and the rights and obligations that can be added or removed from the commons. So I start out with the originals for, which are usus, abusus, abusus. I forgot the other two right now because my head is in a different place. But
Fructus,
Fruits,
huh?
fructus.
abuse,
Fructus,
fruits.
yes. Usus, abusus, and fructus. And usus is usus, fructus, and abusus, which is I can use it but not impose a cost. Yeah, and I can take the rewards from it, but not cause a deprecation of it. And abusus, I can consume it, right? So it's the three stages. I've added a huge list, right, to this basic things, and one of them is attention, right? So I said you don't have a right to anybody's attention. The only necessary right you have, you need to have to exist, is the ability to walk along property lines. In other words, you can't box somebody in on a piece of property and prevent them from getting out of it, right? Well, it's the same thing for I have to be able to act to survive, right? So I have to be able to move on. There have to be public ways, in other words, because that's the two-dimensional space is a limitation. But aside from that, you don't have a right to observe, to listen, to wait. You have the right of transitus, and that's all. I mean, because that's the only right you need to have. Everything else is open to it. So the same thing for setting up a stall, right? So we don't think of it this way, but the law has covered all of this stuff. It's just not codified anywhere systemically like we're talking about, which is this is capital, right? These things are capital, and that's not converted to economic language. And since it's not converted to economic language, isn't all commensurable. So we're just sort of,
I think we should specify for the audience that we don't want to limit those rights that severely. That's just the only one that's necessary.
yeah. Oh no, yeah. Sorry. So if let's say you and I were going to create a new public park, right, or a private park, these are the rights you could have. Like we could say you can't in this particular private park, you can't throw frisbees, ride skateboards, and bicycles. You have to be on foot, right? It's limited to footpaths, right? That's just, so we're just enumerating the kind. How would you explain what rights you have and have withdrawn in a particular area or whatever? And so we're just enumerating what those rights are so people can understand them. And the reason being is that we want people to understand that at some point, you don't have rights. Rights are constructed. You have abilities. Whether you can exercise them or not is a matter of construction. Anyway, so wait a minute. So what were we supposed to be answering now?
We were talking about it. We were talking about attention.
Right. So what did you want to? So I thought you and Martin, you brought that up. I thought you were going to ask me to deal with the problem of female attention addiction.
Yeah, I mean, you have commons covered, like physical commons, but we're gonna have to deal with the internet. And this is the case for outlawing OnlyFans and anything like that.
Well, I mean,
We're profiting from getting someone addicted.
yeah. I don't think it's hard. I mean, that's okay. I don't think that's hard at all. I mean, fundamentally, seduction is baiting into a hazard, right?
Well,
That's
I mean,
Well,
positively used by baiting you into creating a family.
seduction can be true promise too.
no, I mean, I understand that, but there's no way of a true promise happening in that venue, right?
Yeah.
I mean, So let's turn it around.
I mean, they do deliver on a promise, but your subconscious mind is expecting a lot more.
Yes. So what about, so how, what would be the male equivalent in violence? I don't think we have it because you can't do it remotely.
No.
I don't think there is any equivalent. Because that's the equivalent, male equivalent would be violence, force. Men use systematizing. So we give false promises like insurance in political parties. So we tend to do things as a systemic means rather than an interpersonal means. So that's all it is, right? Systemic baiting into hazard versus personal baiting into hazard. Yeah, even the religions that, I mean, men are all constructing these religions, even though they're using the female method of seduction to bait into hazard. Okay, I got it. Anyway, did we have fun today? Was it okay?
It was excellent.
All right. I love you guys. Today is Thursday, June 23rd. We've been on for 2 hours. I will let this convert and then I'll post it. Thank you, gentlemen. It was a joy as always. I got a lot
See
out of this.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Right.